Hello, hope everything is going well in your day. Today, I want to talk to you specifically about vitamin D and really who needs vitamin D and do you need supplements and what's the benefit of vitamin D. So, vitamin D is called the sunshine vitamin. It's a fat soluble vitamin. And it's known as the sunshine vitamin because a lot of us kind of gain our vitamin D through the skin. Our skin is what produces vitamin D and is in response to basically direct sun exposure. So the sun emits different various types of ultraviolet rays. It's ultraviolet B rays that your body uses to make vitamin D. You can also get vitamin D in certain foods like fatty fish, dairy, and etc. So what is your daily requirement for vitamin D? Well, according to the Food and Nutritional Board at the Institute of Medicine, you really need about 600 international units of vitamin D daily if you're below the age of 70. Now, infants and people above 70 need different amounts. So infants is around 400 international units, and those older than 70, 800 international units. Now, like I said, you get vitamin D through sun and certain food, but it's sometimes it's not possible to meet your daily requirements through these mechanisms of just sunlight and diet alone. So few foods have enough vitamin D to meet your daily requirements also. So for instance, the average amount of vitamin D you get from dietary sources alone is about 288 international units. For example, drinking an 8-ounce glass of vitamin D fortified milk will give you about 100 international units. So really only about 1/6 of your daily requirement as adults. And then obviously the sun is something unreliable depending on the climate you live in. So there's also vitamin D supplements that you can take to help kind of get you to that ideal kind of target if you are someone that doesn't get adequate vitamin D through your dietary or sun exposure. So in fact, there's some societies, specifically the Endocrine Society, recommends supplements of 1,500 to 2,000 international units of vitamin D, depending on geography, meaning your sun exposure. Now, infants and children clearly don't need this much in the form of supplement, but really you're just trying to prevent a vitamin D deficiency. So, what is really the health benefits of vitamin D? Well, there's many things that vitamin D does for us. The big things are in impacting your immune system and your bone health. So let's talk a little bit about your bone health. So vitamin D is essential for the absorption of calcium, and really this is what's needed to maintain and develop strong and healthy bones. So anytime you have a vitamin D deficiency, it's going to lead to bone disease. So such things as osteoporosis in the elderly, something called osteomalacia in adults, and rickets in children. So vitamin D is essential in your bone health. Vitamin D is also very much important in kind of your mental health too. In fact, according to research, vitamin D can help improve your mood and really can ward off depression. There's many studies that have found that people that suffer from depression experience really improved symptoms after they receive vitamin D supplements. Vitamin D can help improve seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder. So again, as I already said, vitamin D is made in the skin through sun exposure. So seasonal affective disorder is that mental illness that we see more often in the winter months, since we don't have that sun exposure, and vitamin D can help to improve these types of issues. Now, how this is thought to work is people they experience these seasonal depressions, they produce less vitamin D, obviously, which then affects the activity of serotonin, which is the neurotransmitter that makes you feel good. So when your serotonin levels are off balance, it really puts you at higher risk for mood disorders. So vitamin D can really help stabilize your serotonin levels. In fact, there was a study that conducted on people with fibromyalgia that found that vitamin D deficiency was more common in subjects experiencing depression and anxiety. Vitamin D also has a tremendous impact on your immune system. Maintaining normal blood levels of vitamin D can help you really get fewer respiratory infections, such as the cold or the flu. There was a study or a review of 25 randomized controlled trial that involved over 11,000 participants, and vitamin D deficient people experience a 12% reduction in risk for respiratory infections after taking a vitamin D supplement. So vitamin D has a pretty big impact on your immune system. It also improves your cardiovascular health. Vitamin D can lower your risk for heart failure, stroke, and other heart disease. So we really want to maintain a normal body level of vitamin D because it really does help reduce the stroke, heart failure, and heart disease or cardiovascular disease. Vitamin D has an impact to help lower your risk for type 2 diabetes. And it's thought that vitamin D may help improve your beta cell function. It also increases your tissue insulin sensitivity and will lower inflammation markers. And all this really helps to lower your risk for type 2 diabetes. It can also help to improve your blood sugar levels if you're already a diabetic. It has an impact on cancer. This is something that's really starting to gain more attention about its ability to fight off cancer. So in a recent review of 63 studies, they really examined the possible link between vitamin D and breast cancer, colon, prostate, and ovarian cancer. And they really found in this review some promising results that suggest that vitamin D may actually be an easy and cheap way to help lower your risk for cancer. There was also another study that found that cancer patients who take vitamin D supplements can really reduce their death rate by 25%. So we're starting to learn more and more about vitamin D. You know, it's traditionally thought of as really something related to your bones, which it is, but we're starting to see the impact of vitamin D in other organ systems and other preventative measures. So another big one that's exciting is really the prevention of dementia or cognitive decline. So there's research has found that there are vitamin D receptors in your brain. This really suggests that vitamin D does play some type of role in the cognitive function and also the risk of dementia. There was a study that suggested that vitamin D helps clear up these amyloid plaques. These are the markers that we talk about in Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia. So it's believed that vitamin D does have an impact on prevention of dementia and also cognitive decline. Another group of people that benefit from vitamin D, and it's essential that they don't have a deficiency, is it really supports weight loss. Now, there was a study that found that subjects that are taking calcium and vitamin D supplements, they were able to lose more weight than those taking the placebo. Now, they believe that this was in part due to the appetite suppressing effects of calcium and vitamin D. Also, another study showed that overweight people who take vitamin D supplements daily really have a significant improvement in heart disease risk markers. So again, it helps everyone reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, but it really has a significant impact in those that are overweight. Well, who needs to take vitamin D supplements? So the important thing to remember is your goal is really to try to get enough vitamin D through your sun exposure and then also your dietary components. But the reality of it is often people don't get enough vitamin D, and there's groups of people that are at risk. The first group being vegans. Vegans, they tend to have low vitamin D levels because they generally avoid the vitamin D rich foods that are like meat, eggs, fish, and then the fortified dairy products. In fact, a 2016 study found that vegans had a 34% lower blood level of vitamin D than people who eat dairy and meat. Now, the good news is being vegan doesn't mean that you have to live a life basically with low vitamin D levels. You can incorporate vitamins into your vegan diet by consuming fortified foods. There's fortified oatmeal. There's other milk beverages that contain supplemented or fortified vitamin D. So look for those type of things, even if you're a vegan. Then obviously there are vitamin D supplements. Another group of people at risk of vitamin D deficiency is obese people. Obese people usually have lower levels of vitamin D than non-obese people. And the lower levels often happen because of poor vitamin D absorption and less really skin exposure to the sun. It's even worse among those people that have had gastric bypass or bariatric surgeries. And that's real important to understand this. That's why some researchers suggest that the daily vitamin D recommendations really depend on your body weight rather than just a general recommendation for everyone. But obesity is a risk factor for being deficient in vitamin D. Older people are also a group that are at risk of being deficient in vitamin D. A lot of this may be simply the fact that older people tend to spend more time indoors, which means they really don't have much sun exposure. And then as we become older, our body is really less efficient in making vitamin D with our sun exposure, and also really through absorption of the food that we're eating is impacted as we get older. Another group of people is dark-skinned people, and really this is because the melanina, this is the pigment that causes the brown, black skin and dark-colored skin, hair, and eyes. And the darker your skin, really the more difficult it is for the sun to stimulate vitamin D production in your body. And this means that you need more sun exposure to get enough vitamin D if that's your source of vitamin D. Then obviously geographic location. If you're somewhere that has less sunlight, that's going to affect you. You see this in the winter, but there's other reasons that the geographic location, but it all goes back to sun exposure. And this can really affect your levels of vitamin D. So you may want to consider taking some vitamin D supplements during the winter if you have poor sun exposure or not getting outside. Now, obviously, when we're talking about vitamin D, you don't really need to worry about if you're getting the vitamin D you need through sun exposure and your regular diet or foods, because vitamin D does have a toxicity or kind of an overdose. So I think it's important that we talk a little bit about that, because too much vitamin D can become toxic to your body. It's a fat-soluble vitamin, and this is stored in your body. So high vitamin D levels can result in vitamin D toxicity. So you shouldn't just think that because it's a supplement that you can take as much as you want without any consequences. So toxicity is something we need to speak on. Now, like I said, if you're getting your solely your vitamin D through sunlight and diet, toxicity isn't something you need to worry about. But if you are taking supplements, then it's something you need to be aware of. Now, the good news is it really comes at kind of mega doses of vitamin D in supplements, really kind of those doses higher than 10,000 international units. So I recommend that you never exceed 4,000 international units, because you may then be approaching vitamin D toxicity, and vitamin D toxicity is something that can really be devastating to your body. So what does this look like? Vitamin D toxicity results in excessive thirst, excessive or frequent urination, loss of appetite, weakness, tiredness, confusion. It can actually, in more severe cases, it causes excess of calcium absorption, which puts you at risk for heart, kidney, kind of blood vessel problems. So really, simply because it's a supplement, again, it's not something you should just keep taking as much as you want, because too much can be really detrimental to your health, because there is a toxic component of it. So kind of the key takeaway here is that vitamin D is essential for your health. And there's many ways to get it. It helps us with our bones. It helps us with our cardiovascular system, our brain, our mood. It can help prevent certain diseases. But again, vitamin D is not the cure-all vitamin. So like I said, don't just start taking a bunch of vitamin D supplement, hoping that basically it's going to make you completely healthy, because it doesn't do that. So vitamin D supplementation may be indicated for some people, but again, there is a toxicity level. Another thing to consider is obviously when we talk about getting your vitamin D through sun exposure, excessive sun exposure causes other problems. So I'm not saying just go out and sit in the sun all day long because you want to get your vitamin D levels up. So there is a consequence of prolonged sun exposure. So if you're concerned that you may have a vitamin D deficiency, then I suggest you talk to your doctor. This is something they can measure in blood testing and then get you on an appropriate amount of supplement if you need it. But again, really lifestyle is important here, and also your nutritional intake is essential. So eating healthy is really, really important for a multitude of reasons. But today we're talking about vitamin D and its impact. So making sure you're eating well-balanced meals is going to help you make sure you're getting adequate vitamin D. But again, if you live in areas or don't get the right nutritional components, then supplementation is always an option. But again, I would recommend you speak to your physician if you're concerned about your vitamin D levels and have those things checked. I hope you find this helpful. And again, we're here to help you on your health and wellness journey. So if there's anything we can do for you, let us know, reach out, just ask if there's topics you want us to talk about or investigate for you. Go ahead and make recommendations and we'll look into it. So I appreciate your time and stay well.